Respect to everybody for coming. The only mechuvin here was Eliezer broadcasts online, and I figured if he's in Lakewood, at least tonight, at least the going to the art site, we could have something that has some shaykhs to the going. He told me it's not really about the going, but we could rely on him that he'll make some kind of connection to the Beis Medrash with the Vilna going, and Chavi Rav.
Okay, so first I'm just going to say briefly just a few introductions. Number one is thank you for hosting it. Thank you for arranging it. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that this year is the year of the Chidah. Not only have they printed a lot of Svarim of the Chidah, but there's been 3 different versions of the travels of the Chidah that have come out this year. One of the most remarkable things that you see about the Chidah, besides for that he was such a tremendous gadol, is that he was traveling always for a large amount of his career. And he still was able to be beyond prolific and holding and learning. When one's traveling, it's very hard to be holding in anything. And you see a lot of gadolim, it was very hard for them, but let's say the Chidah, you couldn't even tell that he was traveling. That's an excuse. That's number 2. Number 3 is that I'm not comparing myself in the gadol aspect, I'm just going to compare myself in the excuse of the travel. Number 3 is this is it's a theory. It could be it's completely wrong. Some of the things are right, but as the whole picture, it could still be wrong. It's part of a much bigger picture that I'm definitely not going to be boring you with all the details right now. Therefore, I'm not going to bring all the proofs for everything, just to give some ideas of different things to connect them. Even though it's not straight up learning that maybe parts of it you can't make a Birchas HaTorah, but it's still it's based on Torah Aniyim B'Makam Echer, Ashir B'Makam Acher. It also relates because of the Graz yard site. We'll see some insight into the Graz Beis Medrash that was not noticed before. And just 3 other short things. One is that Mirz Hashem, in a little more than a week, there's going to be a convention in Yerushalayim from the Beis Havad, the 4th Beis Havad, which is a bunch of from Haredi people talking about Svarim and all different types of things. One of the sessions of that convention is going to be devoted to Ga'inim. So this is actually relates to something over there that they will not be saying, but so you'll get some of Eretz Yisrael. I don't know if it's going to be online, so you'll get something beforehand that will be related. Not that I'm speaking there, but it relates to some of the things that are going to be said there. 2 other things is, one is I'm not a professional speaker. I only speak online. It's just me and someone watching me on a camera. So I apologize. And the last thing is like this. Based on all what I will try to say, I'll be able to say it as fast as possible, is that we also show the significance of bibliography, dates, when things happened, when Svarim are printed, reading even the Hagdamas and the Shar of a Sefer, how important it is in order to understand the broader picture of what I hope to attempt to say tonight. Okay, now the title that we gave it is as follows: Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, some people know him as Rabbi Yeshayah Pick, Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis, and the Beis Medrash of the Gra. And there's going to be a dagesh on the world of Ga'inim and Medrash Agada. That the influence of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, and I'm going to claim how it has to do with, somehow it gets to Rabbi Ephraim Zalman and it gets to the Beis Medrash of the Gra. Okay, so the first person to introduce is Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis. Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis is born in 1760, dies in 1828 suddenly, and he's one of the Gedolim of Galicia in that period of time. Interestingly enough, he was never a Rav of any particular city. He is a rich person who was an Askan in his city, but even still, he was considered one of the Gedolei Hadar of his Kufa, which is very uncommon. Means say there are many cases of people that were rich, that were famous, that were learned, but to be a Gadol Hadar in that period of time, especially because he was in close contact already from a young age with the Noid Yehuda, Shagasari, Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, Rabbi Fall Hamburger. Later on with Rabbi Chaim Volozhner, his Talmud Mishkas Yaakov, the Chassam Sofer, Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, and many others. Now, because he was rich, he was able to sit most of his time, he was able to learn and write, and he published many Svarim in his lifetime, and some of his Svarim came in afterwards. And he's famous that his Svarim are in different genres. You say it's different styles, different types of writings. He has Chuvas, and he has Halacha Svarim on all different types of things. Okay. Today, I want to focus on a sefer of his that's less It's well known, but it's not really been focused on what the significance of the Sefer is. And that is his Pirush that he wrote on the Psikta Rabasi. Now, why did he write this Pirush? So he says that he basically fell into depression after his oldest daughter died in 1809. She was very sick. He wasn't able to learn. He writes he wasn't able to learn halacha. So he basically says that he went and wrote a Pirush on Psikta, and fine. He only finished the Pirush in 1825, but he doesn't print it. It's printed afterwards, and the manuscript still exists today in Hebrew University. Now, the question is, okay, so he wrote it, and he says why he wrote it. What's unique over here is that no one in that generation was really writing Perushim on Medrash. No one was really being Isaac in Medrash to write some Perushim, at least in Galicia. So, one of the people that is very involved with the world of Agada, his name is Hanan al-Mak, so he suggests that it really has to do with, there was, let's say in 1806, which is right before B'Ephraim Zalman, there was some Pirush on the Psikta, which we don't know much about, but it existed. And the people from the Beis Medrash of the Gra were Isaac and Medrashim. But the problem is that that's good for Vilna, but B'Ephraim Zalman Golos is far away in Galicia. How do they connect and who at all? Okay, now, when you look in the Pirush, it's Zera Ephraim, of his, you'll see that there's various interesting things in this Pirush, and that is like this. It's not just that sometimes you have a sefer, and a gadol has Torah, and he attaches it to a said sefer, and a lot of times the claim is, he looked for a sefer that he could find, and he put his own. Let's say a darshan would sometimes take a medrash and put it there, but he's not really concerned as much with the actual sefer. Over here, this sefer, the Medrash Psikta, so Rabbi Ephraim Zal Margolis, he was completely concerned with the text of the Medrash. He went through the sefer carefully, closely reading it. And he's very concerned with to understand the actual Medrash. And what that means is he's also concerned with the nusach of the text. In order to do that, he also uses incredible bekiyas in all of Chazal, Yerushalmi, Megillas Tainis, and what's his name? Seder Olam, Tosefta, Mechilta, Tanchuma, other Medrashim, even Agada Bereshis that just came at the time, Masechta Seifrim. He uses all these Medrashim to help understand this Medrash. Not only that, he had incredible bekiyas of Rishonim in that period, that are around at that period of time. He uses that also for the Nusach. Sometimes he suggests that there's mistakes in the text of the Medrash, and he fixes them. Sometimes it's based on the other nuschayis that he finds in other places. Sometimes it's himself. But basically is that, but I'm not going to go into all the details to show all these things, but this is what you see in this Pirush. Now, one of the things you see in this Chibur also is that he uses the Sefer we know as the Sefer HaAruch, which he quotes numerous times, and for two reasons. One is to explain the words of the Medrash, and two, also to explain the nusach of the Psikta. And I will return to explain what these two things with the Aruch shortly. Okay. So basically, here you have a person who's being Isaac in Medrash Agada, intense. He's not really, even though we know the Gra and his Beis Medrash are crazy into Kol Terakul and everything, he is not necessarily, as far as we know, he didn't go to Vilna or anything like that. And he's doing this in Galicia. And the question is how is there any way that we could figure out that maybe something happened that triggered him to be so Isaac in it with this style or something like that? Could be he just did. It's not the question could be that it's not really a question and he just did. But based on what I saw, I'm going to suggest a possibility, and that is as follows.
Any public libraries in Blood?
He had the most extensive library probably of anyone in the city or anywhere around it, including rare books and manuscripts, and tshuvas that were only published in Sephardi places. He imported it in, and that's how the Shari Tshuva was written. It was written from his extensive library. So that even though he did, so I'm not going into it. He does have a connection to Vilna, but it has nothing to do with this, and it only starts a little later. At this time, in 1809, he doesn't have a strong connection with Vilna. Yeah, but there's no one else doing this, so it wouldn't help. He does have a connection to big people in Krakow and everyone else. I'm saying at 15, which is in the 1780s, he's already has a connection with the Noda B'Yehuda, so that's he has connections with people. Anyway, my suggestion is as follows. Looking through his shuvas, you see that, and this, in order to get to this, we moved to Germany in Breslau. What happened is like this: Rabbi Ephraim Zalman, going through his shuvas, we find that one of the people that he wrote a lot to was a yid named Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. So now the story shifts for a few minutes, and that is as follows: Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, Rabbi Yeshayah Pick, is very famous today. Everyone heard of him, but that's about what they heard he existed. Who is he? What was he? What was his significance? Very little. There was once a lecture many years ago set over when Rabbi Avram Berliner, Professor Avram Berliner, got an award, I think, based on the Berlin Foundation or the Pick Foundation. So he gave a lecture where he collected all the history that was known about Rabbi Yeshayah. Later on, Shraga Abramson, he did not like that article, but he also wrote some articles about Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. Why we'll get to soon. Now, Yeshayah Berlin, who is he? So he seems to be born around 1725. He dies in 1799. He's one of the Gedolei Hadar. People don't realize. And he was Zeicha to learn most of his life, Yom V'Layla. And he was a prolific writer. Only the last few years has he become the Rav of Breslau. Now, he wrote Chiburim on all areas of Torah. When I say that, I mean Mishnah, Tosefta, Targum Onkelos, Davening, Machzer, the Aruch, the Tishbi, and Chuvas he had with all different Gedolim, and more. Now, he has an interesting sefer known about when the Gemara says Kasha, he talks about that, and he has the Messiah Shas also, and more. Now, eventually, some of his Agayis are published on the side of the Gemara. His brother-in-law was a printer. They put it on the side. And through this, he was misaken the Nusach a lot of times, or he throws you out a Nusach based on a Shultis and the Sefer HaAruch, and sometimes other Rishonim. And also, he knew, since he had a crazy Bekiyas in Kol Torah Kula, Toseftas, and all different types of things. As I said, he wrote an intense Ian Sefer on Tosefta, which it seems to be lost. Now, the Tukei Seifrim writes that his tziyunim that he wrote opened up at that time when it came out. Everyone understood it was unbelievable how it opened up different areas of learning. It made it easier because it made it more accessible. Now, what's well known is that he had some of his stuff was printed even as very recently. But there exists, even in public libraries today, various manuscripts of him that would be very worthwhile to be printed, but they haven't been published. Okay. Maisa, it's well known is that he wrote a lot to the Noda B'Yehuda. And these chuvas, it could be he was even the person who wrote the most to the Noda B'Yehuda, and the Noda B'Yehuda writes in one place, Ahuvi Yedidi v'chavivi hagoyin hamuvik hamuflu umuflik b'tayru b'maisa. Another time, the Noda B'Yehuda writes about him, Baki b'kula talmuda Bavli Yushalmi Sifri Tosefta B'Tosfos Meruba. Now, the Noda B'Yehuda is not someone that was famous for exaggerating, and if the Noda B'Yehuda said it, at that time the Noda B'Yehuda was probably already, at least in the 1780s, was probably the Gadol Hadar, or for sure was from the Gedolei Hadar, so it's a pretty nice statement to have written about you. The Noda B'Yehuda had a Talmud, his Talmud Muvak was the Relezer Fleckless in a hesped that he gave on Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, and from here you also see again how they looked at him at that time. Asher Yadoirish al kol kutz v'kutz tliyim shal halachos, aye sofer aye shekel aye sofer samavdilim. He was a baki b'kol Torah kula. Then he says chibar asar chiburim asher idenu lo zechinu hayram. And then he says his chiburim were to be mazaka the rabbim, to make everything accessible and everything. And also he was also a chassid, he was an anav, all these types of things. Okay. Anyway, this is Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. Now, one of the things that Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin did that he was famous for was he wrote a pirish, She'ilas Shalom on the Shultis. Okay, so we take that for granted that there's a chibur called Shultis, and that he wrote a pirish on it. But what's the story behind it? So here we see the significance of reading introductions of a sefer, and in the introduction we find a fascinating story. At Bekitzer there was a guy. He was a tutor for kids in the city, and he wasn't making enough money. He was also chavrusa of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin's brother-in-law, who was a printer. So he wanted to make more money, he asked them for an idea. So the idea was, which was a common idea in those days, they'll reprint an old sefer. So they do. What sefer they do? They decide to print the Shultus. Now, when was the Shultus first printed? In 1548. Now, since 1548 till we're holding 1786, it's not printed. That's a few hundred years. Rabbi Yehuda already, who gives askama to this work, was of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. He says no one has this chibur. Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin already points out that the Rabbi, who had a famous library that was known of having library, doesn't either have the Shultus, and no one really had the Shultus. So this person, his name was Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac. He got from the Rav of Breslau, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef Tumim, who seems to have had a very nice library. He had an original Shultus, and he gave it to him. But he said, you know what, I'm going to give you a good idea. You just print the Shultus, no one cares about it. It wasn't available for a few hundred years because there was no demand. Go over to Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, ask him, maybe he'll write you Haggais on the Sefer. So it will help sales. He goes and gives it to him. 3 months later, he gives him this work called Shila Shalom, and that helped. And you see that it's already as we'll see, actually, that seems to have helped sales. And it's printed in 1786. L'maisor Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin continues to write Ha'aros, and it's only printed, the last batch of Ha'aros are printed much later on. Anyway, what does he do? He uses the Shultus, which is a Gaonic work, and he uses it for the Talmud Bavli, the Gersais that could help, and he also adds in a lot of interesting Torah for it that relates to with the focus on the Shultus. It wasn't a guy that just took his Torah on Nashim Mazik and decided, I have a great opportunity to put it into the Shultus over here. No, he's concerned with the Shultus as the Shultus. But we'll get to that shortly. And the Netziv, who ends up writing a monumental work on the Shultus, says that the parish of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin Mamish opened up the Sefer for anyone beforehand. Now that is the next step. The next step is, but what does that have to do with Rafaim Zalmar Goes? The original question. So the answer is that they, as I said, they had a correspondence, a close correspondence. We're able to tell from various letters that we have of them, and we see one of the things that happens is he tells them right away, shortly after the Shultus comes out, basically in 1787, it's printed in 1786. In 1787, he says, I got you Pirish, I have a few Ha'aros, and he sends him some Ha'aros. Now, it seems that he might have been alluding that he doesn't have a copy. Maybe he could send me a copy, and it seems that Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin chapped, and he sends him a copy afterwards with Rabbi Yaakov. It might be that this is Rabbi Yaakov Landau, the son of the Noin Yehuda, who was a very close friend of Rabbi Ephraim Zalman, but I'm not 100% sure yet. Anyway, they have letters back and forth, many letters. Some are printed in the Beis Ephraim and other places. And you see from here, in these letters, what's very interesting is an intense, in-depth discussion of all different things. The Kol Torah Kula plays out over here, but a lot of times it's about the Aruch. And Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin starts talking about, not only, it starts with these Ha'aros on Aruch, but it gets into all different things. It gets into he starts telling about a sefer called Haflasha Be'erichin, which is a Be'indik sefer that Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin wrote on the sefer Aruch. And he tells them different things, and he quotes some big pieces, and Ephraim says to him, oh, thank you so much, just help me, I was mechavan to this, and they deal back and forth. Now, it's very possible, now we see also from elsewhere, Ephraim Zalman was very into the Aruch, not only in his Zer Ephraim, and other places for other reasons, which some of them we'll get to shortly. Now, it could be that because of this, at this time, these early letters, Ephraim Zalman is in his low 20s, so it could be this triggered to make his interest even greater in the Aruch and with the Shultus, but it seems also there's a concept called the Republic of Letters that a lot of times certain Gedolim they didn't even meet, but they used to talk and learning through letters, so they had this connection. Anyway, the what's the chashivas of the Sefer Aruch? So a lot of people think the Aruch is just a dictionary. It has words. You don't know. It's an early gesture. Let's say you're stuck with a word and you just look it up. But the answer is it's not true. An intense looking into the Sefer Aruch, let's say by one of the great experts of the Sefer Aruch was Professor Shraga Abramson, a great Litvische Talmud Chacham from Lomja, and he was an expert amongst many other things in the Sefer Aruch. So he writes that if someone learns the Sefer Aruch carefully, you'll see it's not just the dictionary. It's like a sort of an encyclopedia. Basically, not only when he's talking about the word, he'll bring you the whole girsa, because he knows that that's also going to be useful, and he adds a lot of things that sometimes, he could have just said it with 2 words. This word means this, but he brings you the whole text. And what people chap is a lot of times that nusach all of a sudden could help playing out to understand you have a new nusach in, let's say, a Medrash, because he's saying the word means this like it means in this Medrash, and he brings you the whole line. Also, he preserves a lot of Gaonic sources. So to speak, this is one of the earliest makairos that we had before the Kaira Griza and stuff like that of Gaonic material was in the Sefer Aruch.
By the way, the Targum Neofiti is also, that's how they proved it, because he was...
Right, correct. Anyway, without... Right, exactly. Right. So no, they hold that he really meant it. It can't be. If he did it 10 times, it would be one thing, but he does it throughout the Sefer. So they hold that it must be that he knew, he was conscious of what he was doing, and this is what he meant. Anyway, okay, so this is step 2. Now, what is it? But how is it now? Could I use this somehow to answer my question with the Zera Ephraim? And the answer is like this. I said, one of the things that's significant is looking at the shar of a sefer. So I was randomly looking at the shar of the first print of the Shultis, that Yeshayah Berlin prints in 1786, and there's 5 things in the beginning of the sefer where he says, this is what I'm about to do in the sefer. One of them is, he says, I'm going to do Marmakaimus and Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Mechilta, Sefri, V'Sefer Medrashim. Okay. Then he says, I'm going to look at the Shina Nuschais. Maybe there's a girsa that needs to be changed, or maybe we see a new Nusach and a Sugya based on these girsais. Then he says, what about it is a Mila Udavar Kasha Mechusar Havana? Because it's a Mila Zara, V'loinim Tzabashas, only very rarely. I'm going to look if it's in Rashi Taisis or the Sefer HaAruch, which anyway I said that Yeshayah had a massive parish that he didn't print at the time, but he had already on the Aruch ready to go. Another thing is I'll deal with is stuff that he could be mefarish in the sugya based on the shultas. Now, when you look at these 4 or 5 things, this is it's clear is Rabbi Ephraim Zalmagolis is following this blueprint when he's doing his parish Zera Ephraim. He's also concerned with to be mefarish the sefer based on the Bavli Yerushalmi Mechilta Safra Sefri Medrashim. He's also concerned about the Shini Nuschais and the text of it to look at it very carefully. Sometimes he will point out that there's a new nusach from the text, and he'll play around with it. Also, he uses, as I said, Rashi Taisis to explain the words, the Sefer Aruch. And also then he has his Torah that he puts in here, which is similar to what he does. So it could be consciously, subconsciously, after he got it before, since anyway they were on the same wavelength and the same type of thing, that there was some type of influence of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, his parish on the Shultis with the Zera Ephraim. Okay, but it's really the story is much deeper than this, and that it's as follows. Up till now, we're taking for granted is that everyone knew about Ga'inim in that period of time. We're talking the 1780s. So everyone knew, okay, there's Ga'inim works and there's Ga'inim Svarim and everything like that. And that couldn't be further from the truth. No one at that time knows anything about Ga'inim. And so much so, there's literally nothing printed from Ga'inim at that period of time. If someone is in 1780 and he decides he wants to start building a library and he has all the Rishonim, now he wants to go back to Ga'inim, he will not be able to find anything. Maybe he'll be able to get some rare book dealer at the time and tell him, okay, I'll give you a Shultis from, we quoted that when the Shultis is printed first in the 1500s, but that's it. Pretty much. 1 second. What does exist? So first of all, like this. The SHIUR, who eventually he becomes the first big historian that starts writing the history of the Ga'inim, he says, and he's writing this a little later, he's writing this in the 1830s, Ein lefaninu svarim eis chasimis the Talmud Rabbeinu Sadia rak shiltus ravachi bahag ve'ez chuvas hagainim. So basically, if someone wanted to get something, it's very hard. Now, there is a few things. There's a sefer called Sheila V'Tshuvas Me'Hagainim, which is printed in 1575, but it's very unclear how much it's really Ga'inim. Looking at it, people have pointed out that there's even stuff from the Shulchan Aruch somehow got in there, so it's not clear how much is Ga'onika, as they call it. There's an early work called Hilchos Psukas Min HaGa'inim, but it's printed in 1516, and no one really knows about it or has it. There is, once you get a little later on into the time of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, after he prints the Shultis, there's the Shari Tzedek. All of a sudden around that time, there is the Mishpatei Shvuos and Mekach Memkar. They were printed earlier, but from 1602 and onwards, they're not available and no one has them. No one's using them. there is the Halachas Gedolos. It's printed in 1548, but then it's not printed till 1811. So there's a few hundred years that maybe, as I said, when they wanted to print the Shiltus, Rabbi Yosef Tumim, who was the Rav of Breslau, he happened to have a Shiltus in his library. But I don't know how much he ever used it, and the Gedolim didn't have it or use it so much. What about the Sefer Aruch? The Sefer Aruch also wasn't used. Until the end of the 1600s, it was printed a few times, but then it's not printed pretty much in the 1700s one time, and then 1819, which is later than what we're talking about, it's printed again by Moshe Landau, the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda.
That's why my kids were done.
Later on, right? That's later on.
Just to do this because it was such a lack.
Yeah, but before you even get to Mekitzur Nedamim, the early Maskilim before them, they also were very interested in it, and they start writing about it, and they start printing whatever they find. But yeah, Mekitzur Nedamim was definitely interested in that. Now, so basically, my claim is that this poor guy that didn't have Parnasa, and then he ends up getting the Shiltus printed, was a trigger for everything, because all of a sudden now Yeshayah Berlin writes a Bi in the Kapirish. And as I said, Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Golos hears about it. But not only does Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Golos hear about it, and other Gaonic works start coming out, now we have to get to Vilna. Vilna, the Dayan of Vilna, in the time of the Vilna Gaon, was Rabbi Dov Beis, the author of the Rivet Hazav, who dies in 1797. He wrote this incredible work called Rivet Hazav. Rivet Hazav is Mechaber Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebeksav. He brings tons of Rishayim, and even some of the Gaonim that he had, which, as I said, was come out nothing, but it's usually through Tzitutim of Rishayim, quotes from Rishayim. But he brings the Shiltus. Which Shiltus is he using? The Shiltus of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin, and he brings the Shila Shalom of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. Another great Chacham from Vilna, the great Chai Adam, brings Shiltus. Which edition does he use in his Chai Adam and also his Chacham Adam? The Shiltus of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. He says so. So we see that all of a sudden now it starts, and around this time, all of a sudden, not a lot of works, but a few works do come out, and a few other Gedolim are starting to be Isaac in Gainim. So the Shila Shalom was the first chibur that understood the significance that what lies in the Shiltus, the Girsais, how it could help play out with the Bavli, and this opened up the world of Gainim. Now, the academics that were Isaac in the Sugya of Gainim, so they write out and they map out the whole history. They are not aware that all this was happening much where they say it starts from. This is much earlier from them. They are not aware. Even some of them that are aware of some of the people, but they're not aware of all this. That was happening really about 50 years earlier. Okay, let's say that now. But one last nakuda, which again goes further into the excuse for to tie it to the Beis Medrash of the Vilna Gaon. That's as follows. One of the great questions that's asked relating to the Vilna Gaon is that when does his impact happen, and how does his impact happen, and what's his impact on his generation and the generation immediately afterwards? And how does it happen? I mean, say, how does he become so famous? Was he famous in his lifetime? Was he? What was he? If he was famous in his lifetime, what exactly was he famous for? Who was the mamshich of him? Which people? Who are they? And all these things. And people have been Isaac with this for well over, from literally after he died until Aliyah, and people are constantly coming up with different theories. One of the things that people point out is if you're trying to pinpoint what came out that had an impact, is the world of Agada, Medrashim, and to learn it intensely, is a generation after the Vilna Gaon. People such as the Radal, the Rashash, and many others, the Rabbi Yitzchak Landau, who all these people wrote Perushim on Medrash, besides for what else they wrote. Now, they didn't see the Vilna Gaon, but they link them. There's a fellow who wrote a very interesting doctorate and then book called Gil Pearl, where he links it that we see these people, they were in Vilna, many of them, and they were Isaac in Midrashim, and it's clearly that there was some type of influence in the Vilna Gaon from him. Okay. He suggests that where does this influence come from? One of the people he suggests is Rabbi Cheskel Feivel, the Magid Meisharim of Vilna, who is the author of the famous work, Toldos Adam on Zalman Volozhin. But he doesn't say how. I think he means this because you can see he was a darshaner, and they all heard him speak and everything, and they quote him. Rashash quotes him, Radal quotes him, other people quote him. So he heard him give drushes, and a darshan is usually into Medrash, so maybe that triggered it more, and then they themselves went ahead and wrote intense perushim on Medrash, Okay, but that could be. I don't know. I was not in contact with him to know, but he doesn't explain it. But it seems that there's more to the story, and that is as follows. Mamish not well known is that Rabbi Cheskel Feivel, besides for writing this best-selling book called Toldos Adam, he wrote a pirush on Medrash Rabbah that exists today. It's printed on Bereshis, Shemayis, and Vayikra. And this pirush, similar to Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis, is Isaac in bringing Magbilot, comparisons from Sefer Chazal, a ton of usage of Sefer Aruch, to explain hard words and bringing different girsayos in the actual Medrash. This is what he does throughout the pirush in these 3 volumes that we have, in these the 3 Chalakim of Chumash that it was printed. Now, okay.
What's the name of the Sefer?
It's in the Medrash. It's Biure Mari. It doesn't have a full name even. Biure Mem He Reish Yud Pei. Okay. Now, Rabbi Cheskel Feivel, amongst the many people that he knew well, it's interesting is he knew Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin personally well. His son, Reb Zev, who was the Darshan in Vilna afterwards, who we were zeicha recently to have his drushes printed from manuscript, which is has incredible information. The drush itself is excellent, and also there's a lot of information about Vilna and the Tkufa. Says that my father was nafshay kshura im nefesh hagoyin chassid Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. Okay, and we have actually some things that he says over from him and elsewhere. Now, there's a sefer called Nachlas Avos. He says, I saw the sefer Shila Shalom of Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin pick that was given b'matana from Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin to Rabbi Cheskel Feivel. And it said in the inscription, Bahava uviyadidus. So now, as a side, it happens to be that Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis also was a great friend of Rabbi Cheskel Feivel, but we don't have to come on to that. I'm able to link him directly to Rabbi Yeshayah Berlin. So just like Rabbi Yeshayah had an influence, as I'm claiming, on some level with Galicia, Rabbi Ephraim Zalman, who ends up having influence on all of Galicia, so too, he has this hashpah on Rabbi Cheskel Feivel, and that is also how Rabbi Cheskel Feivel, who did have a connection, Radal, the Rashash, and Rabbi Yitzchak Landa, who all end up writing Purushim on the Medrash Agada. So it's some type of connection, and it will link Germany, Galicia, and Vilna all together. Now, there is something that I'm omitting over here, and it's on purpose because it's still completely unclear. There was a tremendous person who, sadly, the way it works is sometimes if someone has a famous father, so even though they're very big, they sort of get lost, and that is Rabbi Avram ben Agra. Rabbi Avram ben Agra was an expert in Medrash. Incredible, but it's still you have to be able to show that he actually had an influence, let's say, on these people, and that is still a work in progress. But he was Isaac in Medrash Haggadah. He was around the time. He was a big Talmud of his father, but that's not for now. Anyway, but that's the in short.
Wouldn't have to come onto Rabbi Yeshayah Pick if he had such a library in Medrash.
That what?
He wouldn't have to come onto Rabbi Yeshayah Pick if he had Rabbi Roman Agro's massive library of Medrash.
Yeah, but it's not only that, but it's also the method. I'm concerned about the method, not the library. The library, they had saying. The interest is also. Interest is not enough.
How do you get the psikta? Why do you pick psikta?
He picked that one. He picked that one. That doesn't have to. That actually, the Torah doesn't have to be exact. I have to be able to explain the method he's doing. Where does it come from? No one's writing. There's no one beforehand writing such a parish like that. Only maybe you could say people in Vilna, but
it's very interesting. On the side of the Vilna Shas and Shaitik, he very often brings the Aruch.
Right.
Not Alt Girsa, just if he argues with Rashi on a certain...
Right, as I said, he says it's also because he wants you to know the Parish of Milam of the thing. He's very concerned both. In the Sefer, which today we have, which is called Haflash Be'erechen, is an intense parish on Aruch. It's concerned with Rashi, Taisus, how they learn the words and dealing with it.
Even when it's not just dictionary related.
Right,
Even if it's Pshat in the Gemara.
Right, exactly. That's extremely important for him. And 100%.
Writing on Medrash and the Aimic material is all the same.
No. It's two things, but they're using the same method in both. That's what's interesting, that they're using the same.
That is Rabbi Vilna. Is that in any way a product of any of this?
No. No, it's simple, very simple. It's an excellent way of marketing to sell a medrash. To sell the medrash, it's much later on. It's nothing. This years. We're talking the early 1800s. That's the 1870s even. The Medrash Rabbi of Vilna I'm talking about. But it was an amazing work for that period of time because they went and tracked down everything. You say there were masses learning Medrash Be'iyun. People were learning Medrash. Now all of a sudden Vilna makes it that you can learn Medrash amazing with X amount of Purushim. But they put in one page. Yeah, he's Vilna. We identify him with Vilna.
Any support to the theory that the bridge between fire and Medrash Rabbi was done was the work of Maskilim or something like that?
They
But it's not necessarily an evil thing. It's more convenience. They want you to be able. They want to have 2 volumes of everything.
The Broncos claim that he stuck some things in.
It could be that, but the main goal was money.
The main claim that they left it out because of Chazanish says it.
Right. They don't like him at all. Basically, the Stipler doesn't like him at all because of what he wrote in the Meluim and Shulchan Aruch. But it's interesting is that if you read an account of him, in an account you would think he was a regular. He was actually a regular from Orthodox Jew. And one of the things that he was lost is he wrote a book on the Chai Yadam, for example. He was from Shemer Torah Mitzvahs. He was Shemer Shabbos. He might have had interesting shittas, but if you read an entry about him by someone that knew him personally from that time that was only printed a few years ago, you wouldn't be. Again, it doesn't mean that all the problems in Stipler are not problems. They probably are, but that's what's interesting.
A lot of Maskilim in those times were Shemer Torah.
Right, in Vilna. No, but in SHIUR is Galicia. In Vilna, that's when you read this book, you're right. But Vilna, you cannot tell the difference by if you're just reading their raw biography, they sound like regular from people. Then you have to start going through this stuff, and then all of a sudden you start seeing interesting things.
Weren't most Chedush Rishayim printed in the 1730s, 40s, and 50s?
Which?
Chedush Rishayim, Chedush Raj,
Most? Well, not at all.
A large period were in the 50s and 60s.
So that's when the start of it is.
I
But
understand. So is the Shiltas a Goinic thing, or it's just a continuation?
no, it has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. We see.
So it's not on shots. So it's
Right, it's Aramaic. It's impossible to read. You look at most people today. When you look at it, no one's looking at it. Regular yeshiva people, if they pull it out, it's only because the Netziv. It's a convenient place. The Netziv has there. Right. People put it. Many yeshiva libraries have it in the Chumash section.
And the Siv writes a Perush on the Shiltas. Was that in order to write a Perush on the Shiltas? Or
Yes,
or is it
completely.
to get his name out as
No, nothing to do with that. No, the Netziv is a huge chiddush. The Netziv it's an incredible chiddush with the Netziv. The ha'ara is that the Netziv. Imagine if I told you that Reb Shach, in the middle of the Zman, finds out that there's a manuscript in Russia of a Rishon on Masechtas Bava Basra. He's giving a shir on Bava Basra, and you hear he's getting on a plane, and he's going to get. He wants to see that manuscript. You tell me I'm crazy, but that's what the Netziv did with the Shiltas.
Really?
Yeah, he found out that there is a manuscript of the Shiltas. He got on the train. It took him. I tried to ask someone that would know, but he didn't want to do the calculations. There's a way to calculate exactly how long it took him, but it took him a lot longer than getting on a plane and going. The guy told me exactly how to figure it out, but it took him easily a week to get there to see it, and he did to go see the Shiltas. Now, anyone knows anything about the Netziv, he didn't waste a second of his time. That's what he writes. He signs every tshuva of his that he's so Amaz Avodah. So I'm saying.
But he was also so broad.
Say there, but he took off time. I'm saying to go, travel, and everything. He could have sent a shliach. He could have sent. He had people in all different places. He could have said, send me a draft, whatever. He didn't. He went to go see. So Netziv is completely out of the box when it comes to this, and the Shiltas was beyond that. He's the whole time through the Perush.
He did the Shri first before he did the Shiltas.
Right, but it doesn't come out. The Shiltas. Right, that's a different. Right. Correct. Correct.
So what are you hiding about?
Not hiding. Pastor Shalom. I have to be able to make.
Next time.
Oh, nothing. No, I just
I
take out. There's 2 bags in the car.
Once we're here, I guess.
There's 2 bags in the car. I just wanted to take out.
You mentioned the Toldos Adam.
Oh, right.
And
We
I
spoke
actually
about
spoke to
We
you
spoke
on
to
the
that.
phone
Right.
about that. The reason, okay, I happened, the first time I spoke to Eliezer is because I saw a Yeshayah bring a Toldos Adam, and I don't know too much about the Toldos Adam in the Cheskes Bible, and he has it was a stam, it had to do with Mitzvah Yeshayah, and he says a very sharp lashon, something Toldos Adam writes, and he said something sharp, and I chopped some things up over here, so. I heard Rabbi Eliezer say something on one of these shiurim he gave about, and it sounds like he's very into it. So what did you want to tell me? What you
I don't remember the whole.
You said you did a lot of research.
Right,
yeah.
but I don't remember this. There's no way in the world I'm keeping. It's been way too long.
You know
The question.
What?
Do you know anything further about the Yeshayah's connection to the
Rabbi Ephraim Zalman. We spoke about it.
And Shlomo Klieger writes that he's lying, that he was never a Talmud of his, because he had no Talmidim.
Right. So I think
he was sitting and learning, and somebody can come over to him and ask him questions, and he had no Talmidim, and he wasn't.
So at this point, I still can't say with confidence one way or the other. All I could say is that definitely he has to do with Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis. Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis quotes Yeshayah as a question that he asked from him more than once, and it's clear that he had influence on him. But the claim is, for sure, Rabbi Ephraim Zalman did not have a Beis Medrash with a yeshiva and stuff like that, and Talmidim. He maybe had 3 or 4 Talmidim.
Shlomo Klieger is very upset that
but Shlomo Klieger was good with the Yeshayah, and then he gets upset at him at a certain point in time. So you can't always. You have to be able to. It's not pashut exactly what's going on. You say at a certain point in time he would say he was the greatest guy. Then he.
Did a Yeshayah pick a Yeshayah's cross path?
No, he's dead. 1799. Yeshayah the years don't work out. 1799. Breslau. Yeshayah doesn't. It's not German.
And when he moved to London, he was also very young.
Who?
The grandson.
Yeah. He's 15, 16. 16.
Was died in 1793.
Right? He's very young. And as a chiddush is that he's answering this 16-year-old. Imagine a 16-year-old writes these type of shaylas. No way, right?
Who wrote the psikta?
That's a different question I'm not going into because
Is that Gleinik or before pre-Gleinik?
No, it's before.
Sure, Medrash, right?
I'm not talking about it. I'm talking Achronim right now. That's a whole different focus.
That was today's shiur.
No, I'm talking about Rabbi Zalman wrote a parish on something. So what he's writing on, if they knew what the work exactly was, that it seems all these things that this is took years. It took them years till they knew exactly better off what it is. But it's sure early.
What early means?
Early before Gainim. It means before Gainim. Yeah. But after that.
What do you mean? Because the Medrash Hagadol Marshal is late, brings around, right? So the some Medrash must be very late.
They have these Medrash they call Medrash.
Shema Medrash.
Right.
Tema and
Well, right.
Megillus and
Right.
Chanukah.
W. Hoffman, was this what a major part of his research was to find
we don't have that.
He's also he's doing that. Correct, for sure.
The Ravina Hazav, I mentioned just because he brings a lot of Goyin.
He also brings a lot of Goyin, but a lot of Rishonim also. A credible amount for that period of time to do it and to use it. He also, it's clear he had some type of interesting library, and also Neich Minz in his sefer, it's clear he had some interesting library. He was very into Rishonim. Even the newest Rishonim that were coming out, he quotes right away. Yeah, that just came out literally within 10 years of imprinting his work. That's why you see him and Rav Rama Hagra makes sense.
They say I think he was a Gvir.
He's the family, the richest family in Vilna at the time. He's in that family, so.
How do we understand why there was a 300-year gap that no one was interested in printing going?
We don't know.
Unexplained?
But it's the same with Rishonim. That's the main thing. Rishonim only started coming out. He pointed out the Rishonim also. If you not even, and even then, it's a lot of Masechtas only today. Only in the past 20 years are we really having even Rishonim and everything. So it's not.
They didn't have the money to print.
That's one reason. But they do print a lot of Sfarim. There's a lot of Sfarim out. So the answer is they say the Am Shel Shlomo, for example, wrote on many Masechtas, and the manuscript. First, it took a long time for even the ones that we do have to come out, Why did they stop, and why did they lose the manuscript of most of them? Because there was no demand for the Sefer ready then.
It was huge also on Yom Shoshan. He was very
Right, but there was people ready to copy, but there's no demand. Basically, Sfarim are sold based on.
So maybe
The
Shayim.
Shabbos Ari, right? So you go on all of the you had
Right.
to stop. You didn't have the money to print.
Right.
The money didn't have, but there's no interest in first Shas. That's a chiddush.
There was. There are all these types of achronim. Right.
I mean, it's safe. It's a classic.
Right.
And it's all lost.
Right. Even the Gvur Sari took so much longer
Right,
until the
yeah.
Chavetz Chaim prints it. I'm saying.
Almost.
Right. That's a crazy thing. The history of the printing of all the Sfarim, today we mamish take for granted. You just press a button, you have Hebrew books, whatever, in seconds. And even 20 years ago, you didn't have it. But forget about when the Gedolim, what they were learning.
we don't know where it goes.
Who?
We lost.
Right.
No, we
Right, but there was also machlokes there what how to print it. That was part of the holdup. So it was the money. I think they would have found, but there was a machlokes.
This would be all the cash on the famous Chazon Ish that said that Swarm that we didn't have that didn't go to prison.
For sure, it's
such basic. I'm not talking about Rishonim.
Correct, it's
out of the box. No, basic Rishonim. You didn't have a
it's
Rav
completely
in 1700.
it's
The person would
completely
have passed them differently if he
it's
had
completely
that.
against the Chazon Ish, but that's not something. Actually, in Lakewood, maybe you could talk
What's
about
his
it.
Chazon?
You can't talk.
What
No, basically is that the
Talked
Chazon Ish.
about a little bit of one of the.
Right.
That's
talked
what
about
there's
the drama,
siyata d'shmaya of what
No, I didn't say
farm.
Siyata D'Shmaya, just that we can't paskin based on these new Rishonim that come out that didn't go through the
system.
of the Beis Yosef.
So you're saying that there's so
Going to.
I know.
What he did, he mentioned.
You asked the question. I started talking about, but I said
Yeah.
it's a full 2 episodes. One
The
episode.
standard Rishonim didn't have Rash al Torah was.
Yeah. but-
Rash Shelter they had, but regular
No, Rash al
Rishonim.
Torah had Medrash, right?
Yeah, but
All the
that's,
Rishonim were with the Medrash.
that's different. That's each Rishon to Lagufa Shilling.
Then the Chayyim brings a lot of times Medrash, we don't have it.
Right.
Kasher cannot find
Even
it.
Rashi some Medrash and Joshua we don't have.
But each
A
Rishon
few Rashis. Levi.
very late, very late. Yeah.
Hanan Mark claims that he went through the Medrash Rabbi,
had it.
and a third of the Medrash Rabbi is missing. That's in the manuscripts, and the printers just
Correct.
printed it.
Correct.
Which means to say that if somebody would go through all the Kisviyat and everything, so in the Kisviyat you would find
Much more.
material
Correct. Yeah.
than is actually
Right, and
printed.
they're supposed to come out with it for years, and it never happened.
Is there anybody,
There was someone who was from Nachman Zender's house.
Right.
Told me, I heard it from him. He had from floor to ceiling, all over, Kisaviyat, on every Chelga Shas around.
Right. They hid it.
It's all lost.
Right. They hid
Well,
it.
in Warsaw, in the ghetto.
They hid it in Warsaw.
It wasn't printed, all the.
Right. But it was basically ready. It was too late when they hid it. Right. And what Mandelbaum found in a few places. Right.
And then Rabbi Yosef also has
Right.
like
80
volumes,
children.
And Minchas Chinuch.
the base words.
Right. And they found almost. Well, I think only really one thing survived.
Yeah.
The Minchas Chinuch, right? He had so many.
But that was already in his lifetime. He
Oh.
witnessed it getting lost.
is
And
there anybody
why?
that says we would brought up problems, all brought up like that it's Hashgacha, that the Ebershter didn't want it. Is anybody?
Does anyone say those words?
Yeah.
Early? Definitely not, because they never thought like that.
That's a nice reason. Did you find anybody that say such a thing?
No one says it because it wasn't factually true in their time, so they wouldn't say it.
Hashgacha,
You want the
if the
Chazon Ish
came out in
could
the
say
1700s, say, it would be
it was meant to be.
talk of the town.
Right, so it was. All the people that went to it.
Anybody say that Hashgacha that wasn't there till now?
They used the right way.
Shalom Kach would come out, right?
Right.
Now, right? So
Look when Yerushalmi Kachin came out, no one said, oh no, it's a new Rishon, we can't look at it. Everyone was grabbing it until they capped it's a forgery.
should anybody say that?
And they used it right away. They used it right away, la halacha.
Even the Tumul right? Florida that had showed up.
like that.
The Zaire showed up in that door. They just wanted it to show up that.
Right, no, they say that, but you could use it.
Did
I mean, you could
somebody
use it.
say that type of line on our basic Swarm right? We didn't have, till a certain time, all of a sudden it shows up.
Someone said that at art school, no?
The Marsham, they just gave out 2 volumes on the Marsham.
There's always we don't mention it.
They just gave out the 2 volumes on the Marsham.
Yeah.
And they had their one whole section about his student the.
Oh, you write about it?
That was the first thing I wanted to see, if they were honest.
You were awake.
And the Tiny Cook Press, they had a whole, they write about it. They claimed that it was a half year before he was